days. Thanks, Dave. And thanks to everyone else for joining us. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the, as I said, some of the cool stuff that we've been working on over the past little while. So I thought I'd kick off just a bit of background about our company, about Vitality. If you've seen any of our advertising on the tube or on TV, you'll know we're big fans of two things: this very vibrant shade of pink and really quite lazy sausage dogs. But for those of you who don't know about Vitality, we're an insurer. We're built mostly around health and life insurance. We have very recently, and I mean very recently, last month or so, launched a car insurance product as well. Yeah, so my name's Robbie. Dave introduced me. I'm the head of health data science here. Arnab's joining me, who's a data scientist and actuary. He wears many hats, working mostly in the life insurance space. And our talk is split into 4 parts. I'll be with you for the first 2 before handing across to Arnab. And I'm going to talk quite briefly about Vitality's core purpose and what drives our business in the first section, and then dive into some of the methods we use to understand our customers' health in the second section. Arnab's gonna then take that torch, run with it, talking about how those clinical insights are used to incentivize the right behaviors in the right way at the right time in the third section, and we'll wrap up by explaining how we go about attracting the right sort of customers for our business. Cool. So yeah, start off. What are Vitality all about? In a really quite small nutshell, we're all about making people healthier. And there are a lot of reasons for this. 4 behaviors: physical inactivity, poor diet, smoking, and excess drinking are huge risk factors for 4 diseases: cancer, diabetes, and heart and lung disease, which are responsible for almost 60% of all deaths worldwide, which is a really sort of shocking set of numbers when set like that. This is a model that was originally championed by the Oxford Healthcare Alliance as the 3-4-50 model. They didn't originally take into account alcohol, I believe, and we worked with them to expand this into what is now the 4-4-60 model. If you've been paying attention to the news over the past coming on 18 months now, I suppose, you might recognize these risk factors as those also associated with COVID. So while this model was originally developed for non-communicable diseases, those are sort of, diseases you can't catch, it's really just as applicable to those communicable diseases. So if we can discourage these unhealthy behaviors, just change that dial a little bit, then the potential impact is really huge. If we can discourage that behavior, then everyone wins. Our members would obviously win because they get a little extra push to start making healthier choices and improve their well-being. We, as the insurer, win because healthier members are going to be making fewer health and life insurance claims. And those who see the value in the program and who get a lot out of it will lapse their policies at lower rates. And it's a big win for society as a whole as well. Healthier people are less of a burden on our NHS, and they're more productive in the workplace with lower rates of absenteeism. And this is an idea that we call shared value, and it's really central to Vitality's core purpose, which is making people healthier, enhancing and protecting their lives. And it's this that really separates us from other insurers playing in the same spaces. We don't accept the current state of things, and we aim to incentivize positive behavior change to everybody's benefit. But this lofty aspiration only works if we understand our customers really thoroughly. And this understanding comes from 3 main sources. All these are brought together in what we call the Vitality program. So we ask our members to complete a health review, where we ask them about their weight, exercise routines, mental health, eating habits. We also offer a health check, slightly different, where a clinician will verify all that information and also run some clinical tests on blood pressure, blood glucose, cholesterol, things of that nature. We also receive a lot of data from fitness devices, you know, your Garmin's, your Fitbits, your smartwatches and phones. And if you've got one, you'll know it captures a huge amount of data: heart rate, step counts, duration, intensity of workouts, loads of stuff. So we get a lot of very, very rich information there. We also have mental wellness apps which plug into this system, as well as information from weight loss and stop smoking programs. And finally, in order to incentivize these positive behavior changes, we offer rewards through partnerships with many brands. To name drop a few: Virgin, Apple, Amazon, Waitrose. And we know which rewards each member engages with. So Arnab's going to speak much more about that in the second half of our talk. So we get a lot of very rich information from these three sources, but of course this is all in addition to the sources of information that any insurer trades in. So plan information, customer demographics, claim histories, etc., etc. So when it comes to data, we've got a really unique advantage. Our competitors don't know who their healthiest members are, only who's claiming, and that's not quite the same thing. So we're able to concentrate much better on attracting and retaining what we know is the very, very best risks on a more granular basis than our competitors. And also we have very regular interactions when our members engage with us, and that gives us plenty of opportunity to drive positive behavior change. But it also means it's very much not a set it and forget it type of product, which is in stark contrast to a lot of insurance coverage. And that contributes to our members having a much more personal relationship with us than they would with a traditional insurer. And it's one of the reasons why Vitality is a really loved and trusted brand in the UK. So I've spoken an awful lot about data, but I haven't actually said the word science yet. So I thought it's about time we changed that. So Vitality is a well-established insurer, but we pride ourselves on maintaining a startup mentality and on being a disruptive force for good in the insurance market. And one of the reasons we can keep delivering disruption is because Vitality places a really huge premium on data science and data analytics in general. And we, as the data science team, are involved in projects, large, small, all across the business, from strategic initiatives down to the smaller tactical interventions, and also, as we see here, right across the customer life cycle. So all the way through from the pre-sale, marketing and digital, through the sales process and servicing, the claims experience, and if we've done our jobs correctly, hopefully policies starting to renew as well. So as a team, I think we're really quite fortunate that we get that degree of scope and influence, as well as a really unique combination of financial, behavioral, and healthcare data to play with. Extract value from. We're a very serious company. Anyway, that feels like probably about enough setup. So I want to now talk a little bit about health. And about what kind of prize we can win if we can deliver on our purpose and improve the health of our members. So one of the biggest ways we look to make our members healthier is by incentivizing physical exercise. Looking at this graph here, it's hopefully clear to see why. The benefits are just huge. Our most active members over here on the right have mortality rates that are 60% lower than those of the industry in general, and that's obviously fantastic. It's shared value, right? It's obviously good for our members. It's good for us because we're paying out 60% fewer claims, and it's good for society as well. But what's even better is that there are significant improvements, even for the partially active member. And this means we don't have to shift the dial all the way. We don't have to turn everyone into a triathlete or riding in the Tour de France or get everyone to have a resting heart rate of 9. We just need to get people off the couch to start seeing some of these benefits. And we don't just look and try and drive changes because there are benefits for mortality. We are, after all, also a health insurer. But we see the same kind of message when we start looking at morbidity, which is the chance of developing a serious disease, things like heart disease, cancer, lung disease, that sort of thing. And after adjusting for all the relevant factors, primarily age, but level of cover, and incredibly, depressingly, affluence as well, we see that physical activity increasing corresponds with a decrease in the rates of morbidity. It's really quite dramatic as well. We're talking sort of 20–30% reductions here. But what again is particularly cool is that the prize is larger for members who start off from a really low baseline of physical activity. But even our fitter members still see a benefit. So there's no resting on your laurels. Everyone can benefit from doing just a little bit more exercise. And probably exceptions for professional sports people, but you get the point. Anyway, we want to incentivize everyone to take a more active interest in their health, because the more of our members we can reach, the more of the savings on their healthcare costs that we can give back. This idea of sharing the value with new shiny rewards programs, or just reducing premium levels. So that's sort of what we look at in terms of physical activity. But that's not the only thing that we consider. What about your general body health? So members who have a high number of poor health indicators, things like smoking or cholesterol levels or high blood pressure, we see that they make 8% more morbidity-related claims than our very, very healthiest members. And that's even after we take into account the two most important body health factors, which are your weight and your level of stress. So just taking that aside, levels of smoking, cholesterol and high blood pressure, and a couple of other factors really do contribute quite dramatically to morbidity rates. And again, we need to reach everybody, not just the unhealthy. Everyone benefits from making slightly better choices as regards their health. Unfortunately, even if you do make all the right choices, you can't always prevent all the bad things from happening all the time. So it's important that we're able to understand and manage them when they do. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about before I hand across to Arnab is cancer. And there are a lot of reasons why estimating the ultimate cost of a cancer claim is a really, really hard problem. Firstly, cancer it makes up about 20 or 30% of our total claim spend, but it only makes up about 1% of our number of claims. So we don't have very many of those precious data points, even though it's a really hugely relevant risk for us. I do occasionally feel like a terrible person when I find myself wishing we did have more data points before I realize what the implication of that wish actually is. But anyway, another reason why this is a tough problem. Different types of cancers have very, very different cost distributions. You can see a couple of them here. For example, skin cancer is generally very, very cheap to treat. It's a slice and dice. You can chop it off. Whereas something like pancreatic cancer is, as you can see here on the top, it's catastrophically expensive more often than not. The most common cancer that we actually treat, breast cancer, has a huge variation in cost, and there are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it depends on what stage the cancer is picked up in. For breast cancer, is obviously a huge spectrum. For some cancers, it's much easier to identify early than late. And some cancers spread much more aggressively than others, which is obviously makes them a lot harder to treat. But what I suppose I'm really trying to say is that knowledge of one type of cancer doesn't necessarily transfer very well to knowledge about another kind of cancer. And finally, cancer claims don't just happen at a single point in time. Treatments can span for months, occasionally years. And estimating the cost right at the very beginning is ludicrously difficult. Whereas once more information emerges, it becomes fractionally easier, but it's never a trivial problem. It's always difficult, a hard problem. However, while we don't see many cancer claims, we capture a lot of information about them when they do come in. For each treatment, and obviously for cancer, there tend to be quite a lot of treatments. We know obviously the date, the procedure, any prescriptions, we even know the physician that treated them. So as treatments start to come in, we start to build up a picture of the claim, and the sequential nature of how that data flows in prompted us to start using a recurrent net, which is shown here, to estimate how that claim is likely to play out. What's the future cost going to be to us? And as new data emerges on a particular claim, we can pass a longer and longer sequence of data through this net. As the cells in a recurrent net have a memory, they remember what comes earlier in the sequence. And this means that we can pass the full and complete claim history through without having to make any compressing assumptions to squeeze this sequence into a single row of data. The output here on the right that we're predicting is the future cost expected for that claim. Do we still need to pay £10 for this claim, or do we need to pay £10,000? And here's an example of a reasonably high cost claim and how our model performs as that claim develops. So right at the outset, we estimated it would cost £20,000, which is quite expensive, but we underestimated exactly how expensive this was going to be. Ended up costing us £60,000. After 30 days and 5 radiotherapy sessions, we only had £15,000 left to pay, radiotherapy being a very expensive kind of treatment. So we rescore that claim with this new information, and the models, it's had enough information to more accurately assess the trajectory of the claim, which it then continued to track reasonably well through to completion after nearly 8 months. So this method, more than anything else that we've tried, has enabled us to really fully utilize treatment information at every stage of a claim. And while we can't necessarily do a huge amount to influence the trajectory of a claim once it's in flight, it's still really useful information for us to have. So for those who aren't familiar with insurance, we, as insurers, we need to hold capital reserves in order to cover our upcoming liabilities. Our customers would be understandably annoyed if they paid their premiums and we just went off and spent it on printer ink and GPUs. This has happened before. I think the bloke in question bought yachts and fast cars instead of GPUs, but to each their own. And it's one reason why insurance is such a well-regulated industry. Anyway, having an accurate understanding of upcoming costs helps us to hold the right amount. We don't want to hold too much because it's not a good use of capital. And we definitely don't want to hold too little because the bad consequences. This can also give us, aside from setting accurate reserves, it can also give us a good idea of which customers we can offer the most competitive premiums to. So, for example, if we think your claim is unlikely to continue, we might be willing to offer you a slight improvement in the price that you pay for your insurance. So those are just a few of the insights that we've gleaned from our data, and everything that we look at has points to encouraging everyone, not just the at-risk and not just the already engaged, everyone, to be just a little bit more health conscious, really across the spectrum. But before we move on, and I hand across to Arnab to discuss how we work these insights into the way we do business, I want to just take a little step out and talk about some of the techniques that we use to derive these results and some of the techniques we use at Vitality. So our bread and butter tends to be, as I'm sure is the case for most people who work with tabular data, is the GBM and the random forest. But particularly when we're looking at pricing risk, we still rely on the good old-fashioned GLM. And that's because, as I said earlier, it's a well-regulated industry, and our premiums have to be explicable and they have to make sense. So we can't ever allow a situation where taking more cover works out cheaper, or an older member is charged less than an identical younger member. So yeah, there's still definitely a place for those, rock solid, reliable models. As we've just seen, we also have cause to use neural nets in our modelling of cancer claims, and it's not really the topic of this talk. We do a lot of work with text data as well, so NLP models feature quite heavily in our repertoire. what I'm hoping I'm getting across is not only do we have a lot of unique data, that intersection of financial, behavioral, and health data, and quite a wide remit within the company to work on a lot of cool data science related problems, but we actually have a lot of chances to hit a lot of different problems with a lot of different hammers. So it's a very rewarding and diverse environment in which we work. All right, the simple summary of this section is that our most active and healthiest members cost us less and stay with us longer. And how we grow that healthy base and how we encourage more members to get active and to pay attention to their health is what Arnab is going to talk us through now. So Arnab, over to you.
Thanks, Robbie. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Robbie. So before I continue, I just want to address the elephant in the room. I'm sure there'll be a few tired members of the audience who stayed up late last night in the aftermath of the documentary on data science. I'll try my best to make the following sections on personalizing incentives and attracting ideal risk equally enthralling. In this section, we'll talk through how Vitality uses nudge theory and how this applies to creating incentives for our members. Next slide, please. At Vitality, we are all about making people healthier. Our program is built around nudge theory, which is a concept in behavioral economics popularized by Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler. The concept of nudging revolves around trying to deter people from making suboptimal decisions. This can especially be the case with short-term decision-making. However, when we encourage these people to make better decision choices through nudging, the idea of nudging is to help influence someone while maintaining the decision maker's freedom of choice. Robbie explained in section 1 that a healthy lifestyle and engagement with Vitality correlates with better risk and reduced insurance claims. This leads us onto our goal of incentivizing our members to lead more active and healthy lifestyles. At Vitality, we've partnered with leading brands in the health space as well as others and created incentives to encourage our members to get more active. Benefits from our Partners and Rewards program are achieved by earning points. Points are awarded for various activities like walking a certain number of steps, visiting the gym, or buying healthy food. We employ a range of nudges which operate over different timescales: weekly coffees, monthly cinema tickets, as well as longer-term incentives like discounts on Apple Watches. Each nudge has a different impact. Some more obviously impact customer health, like a discounted pair of trainers, and some impact retention, like a free weekly coffee. And some sit in between, like our Apple Watch. Unpacking the effect is complex, and to find the best nudge for each person, we use a cost function to combine the likelihood of take-up of an individual benefit, the likely health improvement of each nudge, and also any impact that nudge will have on a member's retention. For example, we wouldn't recommend a pensioner a Peloton subscription, however, we might offer them our Waitrose or Headspace rewards. Next slide, please. Nudges are useful, but they only work if our members use them. To do this, we need to know on a personalized level what to recommend an individual. This means that we'll want to understand the likelihood that a member will engage with the incentives that we recommend. To do this requires the use of advanced analytics. We start with constructing our data. We combine internal data, such as demographic information, data from devices, geographic data, and health reviews, and then we add external data, for example, affluence scores. Various machine learning models are used and compared. A lot of work goes into what the best predictors are in determining the likelihood that an incentive is adopted. The outcome of our analytics work resulted in using a combination of propensity models, depending on the granularity of actions we want to push. Where we want a very specific action, we can use a recommender system. Or where there are a few possible actions to pick between, we use classification models. The overall result means that we are able to recommend members in real time what they should be doing. Next slide, please. So once we know which actions our member is most likely to be responsive to, The next step is to then estimate the health benefit of doing each action. We want to understand the effect of each nudge and any resultant impact to our risk profile. When calculating the impact of changes in behavior, components can be highly correlated. A traditional model wouldn't be able to differentiate between a drop in BMI or an increase in activity a traditional model wouldn't be able to differentiate between a drop in BMI or an increase in activity, which resulted in a lower mortality rate. Traditional models might attribute the effect to both factors equally, whereas it's more likely that the increase in activity drove both the low mortality and the drop in BMI. Causal models help isolate the different effects. The diagram on the left shows an example of what a causal model looks like. The grey circles indicate factors that are broadly fixed that we wouldn't be able to influence. The pink circles are where vitality can influence through the nudges we've discussed. All these factors feed into members' ultimate mortality or morbidity, and therefore influence members' propensity to make a claim. We can then measure mortality or morbidity improvement, which is shown on the right. The addition of an extra physical activity event has led to a reduction in mortality. A similar approach is taken for estimating the effect on retention. Next slide, please. By combining the propensity to use a benefit, the health benefit from each nudge, and the retention impact, we can determine the optimal nudge. We're able to see how effective each nudge has been from historic data and which is the most effective nudge to use. Once an optimal nudge is determined, we can then test, measure the impact, and feedback learnings into our process. In the graph, we have an example of the impact of nudging. We split our data into a control group and a treatment group. By adding the incentive, we can see that the treatment group has increased the amount of physical activity that they do. This is both a huge benefit for the individual as well as a benefit for us. This gives us confidence that the project work that we're doing is adding real value. We focus mainly around nudges related to physical activity, but the same ideas work for the other areas of our business. We've used a similar approach for our invest and car businesses too. This is all positive, but we're always looking for the next improvement and do have further areas that we want to understand better. For example, when is the best time to intervene and whether there are better nudges that we could be using. So there are still plenty of questions left for us to understand. Next slide, please. Now we've looked at personalizing incentives with nudges, we'll move on to how Vitality finds new members that align with our risk appetite. Next slide. We want to find people who respond well to our nudges, those who are better risks, and those who are ultimately more profitable. The majority of our digital marketing spend is through the Google marketing platform. The platform gives us extensive amount of information and allows us to track key information in one place, such as the total spend, measure lead generation, and assess conversion rates. Google Marketing Platform also has inbuilt bidding functionality to help us target customers who are most likely to be profitable. Unlike a physical product being sold, not all sales of our products are equal, and they don't lead to the same profitability. Those in better health are likely to lead to lower claims and therefore will be less costly over the lifetime of the policy. Because profitability differs based on a member's health, we also want to vary our cost spent to acquire new business. As the graph here shows, we ideally want to spend less on members who are more likely to be costly over the policy term and more on members who are in better health and less likely to claim over the lifetime of their policy. By estimating a value for a lead, we can determine how much we are willing to spend in trying to acquire those leads. I'll now take you through how we place value on each member. Next slide, please. LTV stands for lifetime value. This refers to the value of a member throughout the duration of its policy. Valuing an insurance policy is considerably more complex than valuing something, say, like a magazine subscription. Assumption setting and judgment are required in order to calculate the LTV. Here we have a diagram of how this is calculated. We receive premiums from members throughout the lifetime of their policy, and this will either be the full length of the policy, or when the member cancels, or when the member dies. Claims are then paid out if the member gets sick or dies. So for life insurance, this will be when the policy finishes. We also pay out our partners and rewards in line with when our members use them. And so this is costs associated with our nudges. We also pay our expenses, which would cover items like the cost of setting up a policy and paying expenses towards office rent and staff salaries, to name a few. Each of these components is multiplied by a discount rate and a probability of being received or paid, which for life insurance would be survival. We then sum up at each time period to give the total LTV for each member. In producing an LTV, we use a range of models, and we use these to estimate the different components of the calculation. Next slide, please. It's one thing to predict an accurate LTV, but using it to find similar customers is quite tricky. We're focusing mostly on digital targeting since it can be a lot more advantageous and targeted. We started off with manual adjustments to our bidding in Google to upweigh bids for, say, certain groups based on age, location, or affinities, but this is difficult and it's not scalable. Once we've estimated lifetime value for each successful sale, we upload these back into the Google marketing platform such that they're linked to the leads that had led those sales. This information is then used to optimize our bidding effectively. This information is then used to optimize our bidding, effectively bidding more for prospects that look like those leads that led to sales with high lifetime value, and less for those prospects that look like those leads that had a lower lifetime value. This allows a much higher return on our marketing budget as compared to just bidding for the same prospects, irrespective of profitability we'd get if they convert. Next slide, please. So through targeting our digital ads towards the right prospects, we ensure that we attract the ideal customers. And from properly understanding members' risk, which Robbie showed in section 1, members will also benefit from better premiums. As shown in the diagram across different categories, if we are successful in finding ideal members, they'll already have a healthier lifestyle. And combining that with the right nudges from section 3, we end up with the ideal members who are improving their lifestyles across a range of areas and behaviors. Next slide, please. So all of this helps us to deliver back to Vitality's core purpose and the idea of shared value. If we can drive positive behavior change, it's good for our members, good for us, and good for society. What I hope we've got across is how central data science is to this effort in modeling the risks, determining the optimal incentives, and identifying liked customers. It's incredibly rewarding to work at a company delivering real positive values to society. And if this has struck a chord with you, then good news. Next slide. If the type of work that Robbie and I have discussed is something you'd be interested in doing, please head over to our careers page, where we have a couple of vacancies for data scientists and data engineers to join our team. Thanks for listening, and we'd like to invite any questions you might have.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Arnab, and thanks very much to you as well, Robbie. I absolutely loved that. It was really fantastic to watch along and learn a lot more about what you're doing at Vitality. And I think it was you that mentioned, Robbie, you have a lot of projects, a lot of things to go at, which is really interesting to see the variety in the team. So I know Jess behind the scenes has actually just put a little link into the chat there. So if you are interested in any of those jobs that Arnab mentioned at the end there, please do click those links. Seeing a couple of comments coming through in the chat. Just to shout out Dave Mason saying particularly enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Andrew, thanks for that very interesting range of techniques. So it's nice to know that you've enjoyed it at home. If anyone else feels like putting a little virtual round of applause in the chat, the speakers do always appreciate it. So as mentioned, we do have a few questions in the Q&A. And we'll get through those now, but please do keep them coming. I think I'll start off with a nice soft one for you guys. So there is a lot of variety there, Robbie. what was the most rewarding to work on? Have you got a particular favorite project that you've worked on recently?
So I haven't worked on all of the projects that we presented. I'm only one man. Two struck me as being really interesting. The work I talked through on predicting cancer claims, I found that particularly rewarding. It's nice to crack a difficult nut like that. Yeah. As I did emphasize, it is a tough problem. So finding what to us was quite a new technique, using a recurrent net, and sort of playing with that and getting that to work, I found intensely frustrating, and then it was very rewarding right at the end. I also did quite a lot of work on the piece that Arnab spoke about customer lifetime value modeling, and I enjoyed that immensely, just because it's so blimmin' complex. There's so much to do and so much to get right and so much to fit together that it keeps your brain busy. Yeah.
Perfect. What about yourself, Arnab? And I know you mentioned at the start as well, you've been transitioning from being an actuary towards the data science. What's been the most enjoyable for you, and how have you found that journey?
Yeah, I think the transition from actuarial to data science has been interesting. It's been like a lot of learning. I'm really happy I made the move, and it's nice to like use both aspects of like my exam kind of qualifications towards my kind of day-to-day job as well. Yeah. One of the pieces of work that I really enjoyed doing was around the comparison with the kind of like baseline figures in the industry. So we have these industry tables called CMI, which give everyone an idea of like how likely someone is to die, which I know sounds morbid, but that's kind of our job. And it's nice to see that Vitality has a real impact in reducing that. And you can see as the healthier you get, it does reduce your mortality rate. And it's just nice to know that what we're all working towards at this company is actually working.
Yeah, fantastic. Amazing. As you guys were talking there, I've had a few more comments coming in the chat. So Andrew, thanks for that. Very interesting range of techniques. Molly, thanks. These talks are very interesting. Rob, great to see you, Rob. Very good presentation. Thanks both. Diana Catton, Zahad, Jafir, Jasfin, Jeffrey Payne. Jeffrey saying very good. I think I'll go for a workout after this, which there may be a few people joining you for that one, Jeffrey. Sushil, the list goes on. David Hoyle. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. And we will just flick over to the Q&A if you guys want to read along at the same time. First question at the top there is from Gurkan. I'll direct it towards you, Robbie. And Gurkan was talking about using NLP and text analytics within the insurance business. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of the benefits or possible opportunities in using NLP within insurance?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So I think some of the opportunities that we're working on are not insurance specific. They're going to be common to anyone who gets emails from customers. So it's things like routing and prioritization and filtering out emails that don't need a response. So I guess I won't dwell too much on that. But we get quite a lot of more sort of medical information as well in terms of notes made on particular conditions, or doctor's notes or things like that. So that often captures a lot of information which is difficult to fit into a tabular data format and stored in a nice, easily accessible database. So that's one area which we're actively looking at the moment, is trying to tease more value out of those clinical notes, seeing if there's anything that we're missing in our tabular data.
Perfect. I actually love the way you're saying tease more value out of it, like it's the fine art that it is, Robbie, which is great. Next question there is from Peter Wibberley. With these questions, I'm just going to fire them out there. If you guys have both have an opinion, or you want to direct it to one or the other, just shout of who it's best directed at. Question from Peter Wibberley. As a member, the more data I give you, the more you can tailor my premiums to match my risk. Will this diminish the risk sharing benefits for customers of insurance?
It's another good question. I mean, you're sort of bordering on philosophy at that point. I mean, I know a big, well, not exactly a big debate, but a debate which is going to arise is along the lines of genetic testing or whatever, which will be sort of the ultimate diminishing of risk sharing. And I think Peter's sort of getting at quite a good point, is that there's a bit of a perverse, or not a perverse incentive, but a disincentive to share too much information with Vitality, or there could be. And it's for that reason that the information that people give around things like their BMI or their levels of stress, it doesn't influence their price directly. It's just used to sort of, for us to tailor as Arnab explained, the nudges that we give to you and the support that you receive. So it doesn't actually directly feed into your price, because otherwise everyone would say, no, I don't smoke, my BMI is perfect, I run a marathon every week. Yeah, it would quickly fall apart.
Yeah, understood. Thank you very much. I'm going to shoot down to the next question down from Ina Dooley. I hope I pronounced that right, Ina. I've probably absolutely have been a horrible pronunciation there, so sorry if so. Asking, how do the models accommodate the collinearity in health factors, BMI and physical activity, for example?
Again, an annoyingly good question.
We've got a good audience out there, Robbie. That's what it is. Eh?
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose on the one hand, for certain types of models, I don't want to sound glib, but I don't care really if features are collinear, if they're predictive, because something like a tree-based model can handle that just fine. If we're building something along the lines of a GLM, then we will typically select just one thing, or so just a handful that we believe are not going to be collinear. So in the example that you're given, you've got BMI and physical activity. We'd probably put physical activity because that's the thing that we can most directly influence, or with our nudging program. Arnab spoke a little bit about how we've tried to tackle that problem when he talked about causal inference as well, and that's sort of one of our more recent tools in our toolbox, which we're sort of really starting to get to grips with and understand how it can benefit us, and growing and tailoring our program.
Perfect. Thank you. In terms of the nudging that you do you also kind of gamify it in terms of, do you have like hot streaks of going for a run? You've been for a run 4 weeks in a row, keep it going, and that type of stuff as well?
We actually don't. No. The rewards and the points earning and all that is fixed. We didn't speak about it actually, but we have sort of part of a broader global group headquartered in South Africa, and the market in South Africa does gamify it to a greater degree. So it's perhaps something that we in the UK could look at.
Add it to your list, Robbie, eh? As if you haven't
growing.
got enough to do.
Yeah.
We'll flick on to the next question there from Sushil. Essentially 3 questions, but to kind of summarize it, how much data do you have, and how do you look at your model performance? How do you judge success in terms of your models? And then final one, I'll squeeze it in as well. How often do you retrain the models as well?
A series of excellent questions. Thank you, everybody. Approximate size of our data is big. It's just very big. I honestly don't know exactly, but yeah, I mean, for certain kinds of data, particularly the stuff we get from fitness devices, it's almost obscene how much data we get from them on a daily basis. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't be more useful. In terms of measuring the success of our models, obviously as data scientists, we're interested in sort of, the technical cost functions and things like that. But actually, the success of our models are more dictated by the value that they're adding to the business, and that's sort of ultimately what we're paid to do. And so the value, or the thing we're sort of most interested in is the results of the A/B test that we add whenever something goes live. So it's sort of measuring the impact that it's actually having, rather than how technically accurate the model is. Yeah, obviously the technical accuracy kind of thing, it varies model to model to model. So I couldn't give you just one answer. And in terms of retraining models, I mean, again, it's a bit of a wiggle out answer, but it depends. Some models, for example, things like claims modeling, doesn't change all that much. The environment in which, or the data is in which that plays is pretty stable. So there's no need to retrain on a really regular basis. So we might refresh those, say, annually, when we come up with new techniques or we had a new data source come in. For some things, for example, for a lot of the work that Arnab spoke about on nudging, then that's sort of continually getting little tweaks, little updates, and of course we'll have to update whenever we gain or lose a partner as well. So yeah, again, it varies.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Question there from Abby, and it's more of a generic question about the insurance industry, actually. So maybe for you, Robbie, maybe for Arnab. If someone wants to switch their insurer, is there a way for data sharing between the insurers, or is is everyone just doing their own thing, I'm guessing?
Arnab, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we don't want to make the journey for any of our competitors easier than it needs to be, because they are our competitors. There are also very strict requirements, like say GDPR, about sharing data outside of your own organization. Also, the way that companies record the data points that they need will all be different. So the information we record might be different to, say, one of our competitors. So I think you'd probably want to just go through the whole process of collecting that data regardless. You may not even trust the data, the company that's providing you that data.
Yeah, perfect.
I think what I would just add to that is, at least on the health side, we don't share much data, but we do share like the certificates of under what conditions are underwritten out, so that you don't have to go through that very arduous process of doing it all over again.
Yeah. And in terms of that health data, that actually leads into a further question from Abby. In terms of, do you also have access to GP and secondary care data from NHS trusts? Is it just specific to claims, or can you have access to a person's entire history, as it were?
No, is the short answer. We don't have access to those things. I believe, though I would have to go away and check with the team, that things like if we're investigating fraud, for example, then we may be able to ask for it. But no, we don't. I certainly don't have access to anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Question there from Leon. Really awesome presentation. Thank you. I definitely agree with that, Leon. How do you manage bias in your data sets?
It's a real hot topic, I think, at the moment. It's always a tricky one. We do sort of check for not bias in our data sets per se, but bias in our models, where the models are much more or less accurate for particular protected classes or sort of splits of interest. We have, I think, been quite it's probably more fortunate than anything that we haven't encountered any sort of real bias in any of the models that we build. That would sort of, disadvantage men versus women or young versus old or something like that. It is, I think, worth pointing out, again, just for those unfamiliar with insurance, is that we're not allowed to price differently for gender. So men, an identical man and identical woman in all other ways, but gender will receive the same price, the same treatment. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone finds it, I hope everyone finds it difficult, and it's not just us. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much, Robbie. I'll come back to you, Arnab, actually. There's a question there from Chelsea. Very interesting talk. I know Arnab said that he'd transitioned from being an actuary to data science. I'm just wondering what techniques/tools are similar to both careers. Has there been things from being an actuary that's helped you in data science, or vice versa?
So the way the data science team works at Vitality is there's a combination of data scientists and people who are like working towards actuarial exams who are working within the data science team. So they kind of cross over and do both. In terms of techniques and tools that's similar to both careers, they're both like very mathsy. It really depends on what type of actuarial work that you're doing, because they can vary quite a lot. Robbie essentially might have done something similar where he came from like a more traditional actuarial health pricing role to a more just focused on data science, where he would have been doing a lot of model building, which has been quite similar to the work he does in the data science team. I was doing perhaps less model building, but was doing some projects on the side, which helped me go into the data science team. Also, Vitality is really good at kind of encouraging the whole business and all the subsidiaries to get involved with data science. If you're working in an actuarial team, we have like a competition each year where people from all across the world compete to come up with the best new kind of like data science idea, and it will be non-data science teams that can win that.
Awesome, sounds great, fantastic, thank you. Flicking it back a little bit, I think as you mentioned, there's definitely an ethical element to a lot of the insurance industry and pricing and things like that. Question there from Gavita at the bottom. Thank you for the engaging presentation. How do you make your model interpretable and explainable? Is that something that you guys have to, I guess, think about?
It's a huge concern for us, yes. A model that isn't explainable or interpretable is unlikely to get its feet off the ground. It depends in which or with which team we're working, and the purpose of the model. So I think I mentioned briefly that our bread and butter, I should say, is the GBM. It is the random forest, and for things like that, we firstly make sure that the input features are reasonably sensible. For example, we tend not to use dimensionality reduction to create some predictive but kind of garbled features. So we make sure our input features are things that a subject matter expert would understand. And then on top of that, I think we've got the usual data science toolkit, things like SHAP, not so much LIME, partial and feature importance, plots of those nature. And again, I think I mentioned that for stuff that's related more to pricing, where interpretability is there's a much higher premium on it, it's much more important, then we do actually fall back and use our good old GLMs, because we know exactly what's going in there and exactly how all the data is interacting, and sort of grow it more than just build it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Definitely makes sense, and it's one of those, I think, as you start to look at it, there's just more and more you can give, as you say, a bit of a can of worms. The question there at the top from Lauren, it's a bit more generic, again, perhaps about the insurance industry and the future of it. If it's something you've got an opinion on, great. Obviously, if not, no problem whatsoever. But Lauren's essentially asking, do you see genetic screening becoming a more prominent data source in the future, particularly for identifying those that are at greatest risk of cancer, etc., in terms of forecasting? Do you think that this type of data will eventually become part of insurance modelling?
It's a good question. I haven't given it a huge amount of thought, so I'll give some thoughts off the cuff. I think in the very long term, we're talking 20, 50 years, then probably insurers would probably want to use it once it becomes affordable and quick and sort of more ubiquitous in society. Whether it will be sort of palatable to the market, with a society as a whole would accept that, I'm less certain of. As a customer, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, but 20 years from now, maybe I'll feel differently. Yeah. I think it's also a question of regulation as well. Obviously, with GDPR protecting our personally identifiable information, that does extend to genetics, but it's not so widespread at the moment, and genetic testing, I suppose, or the information around it. So I would say, yeah, it's probably one we'd like to use, but I would say it's a good few years off, and it's subject to sort of opinions of the public and the government at large.
It becomes less of a data conversation and more of a wider society question as well, doesn't it?
Exactly.
But yeah, really interesting talking point, Lauren. So thanks for sending that in. I'm a little bit conscious of time, so we'll perhaps take 2 more questions and then wrap it up. You guys have been absolutely fantastic firing through these in very rapid succession as well. So I'm going to take the top one there from David, and then I'll I've scribbled a little one down myself, so I'll maybe treat myself to my own question at the end as well. So question from David Hoyle: when you optimize your LTV model, do you take into account the uncertainty of the component models / predictions?
So I suppose that question is more, is it a stochastic or a deterministic sort of approach? Apologies if I'm misinterpreting, but that's how I am going to interpret it. Our models are, we have a mix. Some of it's stochastic, some flavors are stochastic, some are deterministic. The one we actually presented is deterministic, so it doesn't take into account the inherent uncertainty. We're just using essentially our best estimate of what's going to happen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then I think for me, I'm a fan of a wearable. So yeah, I like to know how many steps I've done and what my heart rate is and stuff like that. And as mentioned, it's definitely not 9. It's definitely a lot higher than that. So obviously that generates you a lot of data, I'm guessing. How do you summarize that data to make it useful?
So I suppose that goes back a little bit to interpretability and explainability. Question from earlier. So we typically try and keep it simple, easy to understand. So we're doing things like rolling averages over a period of time, maximum and minimum, 75th percentiles, all that sort of stuff. Number of events in the past week, month, and ratios of all those things. We have tried more exotic techniques in the past, and they've shown to be slightly more accurate. But the trade-off we felt of the lack of explainability it just wasn't worth it, really. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think I'll be speaking for everyone, actually. We've had loads of comments in the chat coming through saying thank you, but it's been a real eye-opener in terms of the work that you do at Vitality and the variety of the work that you're doing. So I definitely want to speak for everyone and say thank you for giving up the time. I know we were saying beforehand as well, it's not just the hour to come and give a presentation, is it? It's all the prep and pulling the use cases together, building the deck, practicing, etc. So I know you guys have worked really hard on it behind the scenes. So I'd like to personally thank you for that. I'd also like to thank Vitality for being so supportive of the data community. It's great to see, obviously organisations don't have to do this type of thing, but it's awesome that Vitality are. And I know we've mentioned it a couple of times now. Obviously you are looking for people to come and join. So we've put the links in the chat. I suspect if you do apply there, you may end up speaking to a lovely lady called Olivia in the talent team, and she'll take you through everything from there. So just drawing things to a close, obviously it is our customer marketing and growth month. We have got a couple more sessions left, so it'd be great to see some of you online there. But yeah, just to wrap it up, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Arnab, for your time. I hope you've enjoyed your experience with the Data Science Festival.
No, thanks very much for the invite. It's been a lot of fun.
Good fun. Hopefully we get you guys back. I could definitely listen to you all day, I think. So awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in future events. Have a good one. Bye-bye.